All right, what is up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode here on the Lure Lab. And as always, I am your host, the Captain Andrew Full. And today's episode is going to be a really good one. We have Andrew Loberg joining us, Major League Fishing Invitational Pro, and we're diving into another really fun technique to fish here in the fall, and that is square bills. And once again, it's another technique that I am not entirely proficient in during the fall. So I'm going to enjoy learning about this as much as everyone who tunes in. But I'm excited to see how Andrew here breaks down square whale fishing in the fall and helps him put more fish in the boat. So without further ado, he stepped away for a second. We'll get him on here and we're going to talk about colors and baits and when to throw them. So let's get him on. Hey, man, sorry about that.
No, it's all good. Thanks for having me on, man. I'm
Of
super
course.
stoked to talk about one of my favorite times of year with one of my favorite lures to ever catch bass on.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. I think Bailey was the one who actually sent me your post from, I think it was Lake of the Ozarks, where you're holding up the two rods with the square bills. And he goes,
Yeah.
"This is a great square bill episode idea." And I was like, all right, I'm reaching out.
Yeah.
So perfect.
Yeah.
So
A lot of my good finishes over my career have been on some sort of crankbait, and I never really realized that I like throwing it so much until you look at some of my tournament finishes with it and stuff. So I'm addicted to it, and I have all sorts of boxes and different sizes and colors. So it's a good time.
yeah, I think one of the best attributes to a crankbait too, not just the square bill, is that you can not just catch numbers on it, but it catches some big ones.
It catches giant ones. And the other thing, too, with the crankbait is it keeps fishing extremely entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the let's make a cast and sit there. It's let's wind, let's freaking cover some water, and let's just get all hot and sweaty, and your arms just cramping up, like you're catching some big ones and a lot of fish. So it's one of my favorite things to do.
I love bumping like a square bill or a ball off like a tree branch and watching it pop over, and all of a sudden you pause it for a half a second, and you see that green shadow or brown one just but and you're like, oh yeah, I'm addicted.
In the fall, I mean, just like the spring, I mean, you can kind of throw them all year round. I mean, you can, but just like the two best seasons, in my opinion, are the spring and the fall. And fall is just a phenomenal time. They're just gorging on bait and crawdads and anything they can get their faces in. So it's a fun time of year to fish.
So I guess that will lead us into the first question, right? Like, why should somebody throw a square bill in the fall, and why do you throw the square bill in the fall?
Yeah, kind of like what I touched on like 3 seconds ago was covering the water, and the fall, and you have the fall transition and then the fall. And most of the Southeast, like where I'm at, it's now just becoming fall. I mean, it's been like in the hundreds, it seems like the last like 4 months, but most of the country, I would assume now, is in the fall. And what happens is a lot of the bait, they basically follow the highways from a main river to a creek channel, and they want to be shallow. The thermocline pushes the bait up, and everything kind of rushes to the bank per se because they want that cooler water. And with some rain and whatnot, that's what they start feeding on. And a square bill is so important because, one, you can cover a ton of water, and two, it's a reaction strike, and it just mimics those smaller bait fish. And the bait fish that they're trying to imitate, or that we're trying to imitate, I mean, dude, they get microscopic.
Yeah.
And if you they get so small to where, like some of these, like this is like a 1.5 style crankbait. I should probably throw a shad killer up there. Oh, this is a 1.5 style. They get so much smaller than this where it makes it look like the bait is so big. And if you throw something slow that is this size even, it just doesn't look real. But if you reel it past them very fast, it creates a reaction bite. And that's what this square bill.
So you're basically speed cranking a square bill in the fall.
Exactly. And I listened to your last episode, and it kind of goes hand in hand with what we're going to talk about today with square bills. You want to be pretty fast. I mean, it's not like you're just slow rolling like you would in the spring. Like if you're going to be throwing like a big balsa or like a big like BDS3 and just really fishing it slow in the springtime, trying to trigger those fish, it can happen, but most of the time in the fall, across the country, I mean, it's a wind and as fast as you can, 7-3, 8-1.
I was just about to ask you, like, what is your preferred setup then? Because we're talking about like speed cranking square bill. So is it a different setup than you would use in the spring? And then kind of talk about your rod, reel, and then your fluorocarbon. And I know when I crankbait fish, I use different line sizes for depth. So do you mind like touching on that as well?
Yeah, I know. I do the same exact thing with line sizes and depth with a Squarebill, and with the same Squarebill. It could be, this is a 1.5, and I'll go from 10 pound, 100% fluoro, all the way up to 15, maybe 17 pound if I get a little wild hair. But your line size on a Squarebill will dictate your depth and the action of the bait. Most of the time, when people talk about line size and crankbaits, all they think about, which is a majority of it, is depth. Let's get this thing from 0 to 2 feet. Let's get it from 2 to 4 or 2 to 6, going from 15 to 10 pound. But in reality, what happens a lot of time too is it changes your action of your bait. It swings a lot wider. You can fish it a lot faster. There's a lot of different attributes from your line size and diameter and the speed of your reel that your Squarebill will have.
So just to be clear real fast, if you go down in line size, you're going to get more list and roll to the Squarebill. And when you go up in line size, it's going to get more tight and streamlined.
Exactly. Like there's a lot of like manufacturers that put on their crankbaits on the back of them that say like, oh, we tested these crankbaits with 12-pound tests and they should run from 10 to 12 feet. And a lot of times that's true based on their line diameter. But if you play with from 10 to 8 pound or go up in line size, it changes the action of the bait fully. So you can get in depth that way. But to bring it back a little bit, just to keep it simple, and that's kind of what I like to do because I go like pretty far in depth with a lot of cranking. But my first step, especially approaching a new lake or just any type of lake that I want to go out for the first time in the fall, I keep it simple. I always try to run 15 or 12-pound tests, depending how dirty it is. If it's really stained, I'm going to go 15-pound with just like your normal, 1.5 or 2.5 Squarebills. And if it's like semi-clear, I go 12. And most of the time, I'm going to have like a 7.3 to 7.5 cranking rod. It's, in my opinion, that rod is extremely important. Graphite, 100% graphite will work, but in my opinion, that blend with graphite and glass, or just an all glass rod, in my opinion, is just phenomenal with casting, with hookup ratio, and just how they eat it. So rod, line, reel, I try to keep everything 7.3 and above. 8-to-1 gets a little funky sometimes because you'll blow out a crankbait every now and then.
Because you're reeling too fast.
Yeah, as far as you're reeling too fast, you're getting pretty psyched up. Fish are busting up, but that crankbait wants to roll over.
Do you ever go down to like a 6.3 or a 6.5?
Not really, no.
So 7.2, you would say, is like your preferred gear ratio.
Yep, exactly. And that's only because I really want that reaction. I don't want them to look at the bait too long. I want them to just, it's passing by them, and I want them to freak out and eat it. That's mainly what I'm thinking about. And if I go slower, I feel like in my opinion, you're kind of losing some bites only because they look at it too long. With how much pressure we get in our lakes nowadays, they see so many baits, and if you're on a true reaction bite, bait fish style pattern, you got to get something by them quick and accurate. And if you do those two things, it'll trigger that bite. And that's what you're doing, is triggering a bite. You're not making them feed necessarily, because in the fall time, there's so much bait around them. They have all the abundance in the world that they can feed on and have a meal. But if you present this bait pretty close in front of them or in an ambush target very quickly, they're going to react to it like, oh, I'm not feeding. I want to eat that thing because it's in my face. I see this bright, shiny thing going across my face, and I'm going to eat it.
Yeah, I love it. So now here's a question for you, and it's like the age-old debate, right? And we're kind of slightly going off topic, but I think it's important as well. Treble hooks. Everybody talks about round bends or EWGs. So if you're speed cranking a Squarebill, are you an EWG guy or are you a round bend guy, and why?
So my buddy that I travel with, Phil Dustra, he's probably going to kill me for showing people this or whatever, but I'm actually both.
Both. Interesting. So
I
round bend on the back and EWG on the front.
Yeah, most of the time that's kind of like what I like to rock. If I know like they're crushing it, like it's the deal. Like you got the color, you got the spot, you got the bait. I'm throwing EWGs all the way. Like when it's happening, you're going EWGs because when you hook them with that bait, they're not going to come off most of the time. If they get a little frisky and they're not or finicky and they're not really doing it very well, then I'm going to go with that round bend style hook.
And is that because it hooks them better when they like slap at it?
Yeah,
Or
yeah, I've seen that round bend when they slap at it or don't really get it down their throat. That round bend just keeps them a little bit better and keeps them longer.
interesting. See,
Yeah.
now in my theory, I go the exact opposite. I like an EWG when they're slapping at it, and if they're choking it, I want a round bend. So
Mhm.
that it's funny how that like everybody
Yeah,
has
and it
different
could just be
preferences,
mental.
right?
It could just be a mental thing too. It could
100%.
be 100% where they just you can have either one. You can have two round bends or just two EWGs, and it could work side by side.
Got it.
But that's the other thing about cranking or just fishing in general. Like the confidence is just so huge.
Do you ever replace like the split rings? Just
Uh,
some factory split rings that come on some baits will flex out after too many uses, and I know some people who change them and some who do not,
yeah,
based on like line size and stuff too, and rod. Like
yeah.
it. So you do or you don't?
I do, yeah, and
Oh,
I've kind of gotten to. I'll use a snap as well, depending on line size.
what does the snap do?
I think
I've never been a snap guy, so like, pardon my
yeah,
ignorance here. I'm
it's
not
kind
on
of
the snap train currently, so I'm just curious your
yeah,
ideology behind it.
it's kind of one of those deals where, and I think it's another mental like I don't know. I feel like my bait runs a little bit truer. So like right this one right here, this is a BDS2, Lucky Crab BDS2. I have it's on a split ring. Let me where my camera. A
Yeah, I
split
see it.
ring
I
and
see
a
it.
snap, right?
Which snap is that?
It's Decoy makes it.
Okay. Very
It's pretty good.
familiar with
I
their
love that
products.
snap. It's a great snap to have. But on I don't know. It could just be a mental thing, and also changing out colors. It makes it a lot easier too.
Yeah. Every
So my
tying
buddy
and
Phil
cutting.
got me onto this a little bit as well. And when you buy a crankbait straight out of the package, and you make a cast with just a split ring, and it runs to a little bit to the left or right or whatever, maybe you have to tweak it and tune your crankbaits. One, that's fine, but two, I think having this snap kind of mitigates some of that.
Like
It
helps
kind of
alleviate it.
Yeah, it almost when you I'm not really explaining this very well at all with how I think about it, but you're tying your bait that much further away from the line tie, right? So
Yeah.
it does something to it. Like your line is
It's
that much
science.
yeah,
It's
it's that
science.
much further away from the actual line tie itself. So I don't know. In my head, I
The
think it runs a little bit
hypothesis.
truer. It
I
runs a little
like it.
better. Sometimes it does grab grass a little bit more. You can swap a bait out way easier and that type of deal, especially in practice. It makes it easy. But I have been rocking the snap lately, and I actually like it.
And it doesn't like impede casting or anything or
No, because
accuracy
I
of
thought
casting.
a lot of the times too, like you'll have your line wrap around and all sorts of stuff, but no, it doesn't.
It's good to
Yeah.
know. I'll
Yeah.
have to
And
look at
I
snap
also got a
next time.
little hair, Larry with it too, with it going past the bill. I don't know if you can see that, but
Yeah.
I've had zero issues with that as well. But it's something to try. I mean, it looks a little funky sometimes with having a snap and a swivel, and it
Do you ever take like the
first
swivel
ring.
off and then go right into the eye tie on the bill, or do you just leave the swivel on?
No, I won't go as far as taking it off. I mean, like most of your like speed traps and stuff, they normally just come stock with a snap. That's just how they come. But no, most of the time, I'll just rock it with
Like
two,
it.
which is kind of weird looking, but it works.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
So here's another question for you, right? Like one, when is it the best time to throw Squarebill in the fall? But also, I want to add in here too, because this might make you talk for a little bit, and I apologize on that. But
It's
how do
okay.
you choose which color pattern to throw? And is it
Yeah.
like a forage based? Is it conditions? Is it both? Like,
yeah. So when I first pick up the Squarebill, like, okay, it's fall, we got cooler weather, the bait's up shallow. Most of the time, your bait fish are going to relate to some rocks, docks, most of your areas where there's any type of current, maybe whether that be from a stream, a creek, a river, or wind current. And those are your kind of main staples as far as like when and where to pick up a Squarebill. So you have wood, which could be on docks, rock, levees, and then any type of wind current or current driven stuff. And really on those types of areas, and that's what a lot of fish relate to in the fall anyways, because that's where a lot of the bait goes, is you just pick it up and throw it. And most of those fish are going to be in that 0 to 6 foot range.
mm-hmm.
And depending on your water clarity, you're either going to be throwing like a 1.5, just keeping it really small. Like if it's like semi-clear water, you're going to want to keep it, relatively small bait fish style pattern, because those bait fish are really small and they can see that. Or you're going to go to like a 2.5, something if it's a little bit stained.
That thing's been chewed. I just want to point that out.
It's had a couple.
Just a couple.
Yeah. It's going to have your 2.5. It's a little bit more stained. Even though those bait fish are going to be the same size as something like this, you're just moving more water to create that bite so that they can see it and feel it on their, lateral lines and whatnot. Or they're going to go to like a 3.5, something way bigger.
So when would you throw like a translucent bait as opposed to like an opaque one like the whites or a foiled bait?
Yeah, that's all just going to depend on watercolor. And to be honest with you, I don't like this ghost minnow style color. I don't throw it a ton. I have, and like I clear like my home lake back at home in California, ghost minnow is one of the best colors to ever throw. I'll throw ghost minnow or that translucent color when it's not as windy, but you also have a little bit of stained water. Like if it's too clear and it's not, windy or anything, and you still have all that bait, that's when you like kind of put the crankbait down and you pick up a topwater or something, or a fluke or something like that, and start firing that around. But if you have a little wind, or if it's algaed out or a little brown or something like that, then I'll go with that a little bit more translucent. But most of the time, it's gonna be like this is the pearl threadfin shad color.
Yeah,
it's just like you said, just a painted color, like the American shad. This is like Lucky Craft's staple. I mean, that just mimics
great color.
Any bait fish. If it's super stained, it doesn't have to be super stained. Like
that thing's been chewed.
It's like a black moss. Yeah, this one's been gotten chewed too. Or if they're around, and a lot of people think about bait fish, but you know what? They eat the dads as well. You know what I mean? They eat crawdads.
Now, do you ever throw like a bluegill colored Squarebill as well?
I do a little bit, but if I'm being completely honest with you, I have a couple right here. Right here. So this is like Lucky Craft's color, like their bluegill-ish color. It's such a good one. It's a really, really good color. And I almost don't throw it to mimic a bluegill. I throw it in relation to the watercolor to mimic like some sort of bait, like a shad or some sort of fish.
Great tip.
And it will go towards, a bluegill if there are bluegill in the area. But to me, a bluegill, I'd rather throw a swim bait, a big swim bait or something like that if I'm going to mimic one.
Very West Coast of you.
Yeah. So that's kind of what I like to do with the bluegill imitating stuff. But yeah, that bluegill color style, I try to lean towards more of the shad imitating, but based off of the watercolor.
Got it. And now, what would be like your ideal water temps for fishing a Squarebill in the fall? Because for like up here in the Northeast, right? Like once the water gets below a certain point, our fish will stop eating. And for the viewership, like around the rest of the country, their lakes don't freeze nearly as much as like ours up here in the north. Right. So I'm curious, like what the ideal water temp swing, so from like low to high, that you try to look for to throw a speed Squarebill
type setup in the fall? Yeah, typically in the fall, once that water temp gets below 70, I mean, it's full force. Let's let it rip. I mean, below 70. And I throw it pretty much most of year round. I have some sort of Squarebill tied on. Like I was at the Potomac this year and had a really good finish there. And I caught most of my fish, a lot of them on this one here. And I caught it on 1.5. And that was summertime, water, high 70s, low 80s, that type of deal. But
just bumping and grinding.
Typical fall, yeah, it's that low 70s, high 60s, and I'll fish it all the way down, to the low 50s, high 40s. High 40s get a little tricky. I'm not a cold water guy like you are, so I don't know what high 40s look like much. But
yeah,
if I were to go into the high 40s, low 50s, it'd probably be you're going to be more looking at balsa than anything. But
I agree with that.
But yeah, if I were to take a water temp across the board, that high 60s, low 70s across the nation would probably work out best.
Yeah, I like it. Sounds like fun. Now, another question for you. Say you show up to a tournament, right? And you're in full blown practice mode. And you're like, I'm going to crank and wind to see if I can get a bite. All the conditions are right. You're running down the lake or you're doing your map study. What would be like the ideal area for somebody to go and throw a crankbait and possibly get their first bite or just get confidence in throwing a Squarebill?
Yeah. So if your lake has any type of bridges, that are somewhat like leading in the back of a creek, off of the main lake, any type of pinch points. So that could be if you have your main lake and then you have a main river channel and then you have like an overpass of some sort or somewhere near a dam. I'm just trying to think of areas where there's like a pinch point of something where current can flow through and there's rock. That's probably going to be your highest probability of catching a bass or something on a Squarebill because one, you have riprap, two, you have current, three, because you have the type of structure to throw a Squarebill on. You have current and you have bait fish, and there are fish feeding on a riprap, a bridge piling all day. They go up and down all day. So that's probably your most beneficial. You have different types of rock transitions that might be a little bit too more in depth, but rock transitions are really good.
If you're going down a bank and say it's a hard clay bank and all of a sudden you get a little bit of like cobble rock, that would be a good transition area.
That would be a great transition area. And then also just to keep it, fairly basic, and this is not basic, it's just how it works is in your typical fall, they want to be going in the backs of these creeks to that cooler water. So if you have any type of rock structure, docks, things like that is leading towards the back of a creek. So you have your main river, and then you have like your creek that bends off into it. If you can get to the back of that, if there's any type of wood, any type of rock structure or anything in the back of that, that's going to be another great spot to look at.
That's awesome.
But yeah, your Squarebill is really just a tool to make a reaction bite with all the bait that's around in the fall and just cover water, because the fall seems very glorious just off of how tough summertime fishing can be, more like in the Southeast, the Midwest. Unlike where you're at, you could just catch 5 and 6 pound smallmouth all the time. But most of the country,
all the time.
Yeah, most of the country, summer kind of isn't as fun sometimes. So the fall can seem just like, oh my gosh, here we are. This is going to be great. But in reality, it can be very tough, and you have to cover a ton of water. And
I personally think the fall is one of the trickiest times to catch fish because it's almost like the weird saying of they're everywhere, but they're not everywhere.
Exactly.
They're very, once you find them, they're everywhere, but they're in very specific tiny spots, and then every day they change.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, you stupid fish.
Exactly.
They make me so mad sometimes.
Yeah. And that's why these, crankbaits, the Lucky Craft 1.5 and 2.5, they mimic the bait fish so well, and you could just cover so much water, and that's so big because once you do catch one, there's going to be more behind it.
Yeah, I love it. So, all right, Andrew, I'm going to hit you with the final question here, unless you have anything else that you feel like would be important to the viewer, but you can do it now or after. But it's a Do It Molds Juice to the Show, which is all tackle customization. I love the fact that we talked about treble hooks because that is customizing your Squarebill to the needs and your confidence, right? But if you had one juicy tip to give the people who are tuning in about Squarebill fishing, what would it be?
One, as far as a Do It Mold type of customization.
Nope. Doesn't even have to be a Do It Molds customization, or it could be just one juicy tip to help people catch more bass with a Squarebill.
So I think the biggest tip, especially with Squarebill fishing, is there are so many different colors and so many different things that you go on Tackle Warehouse and you go into the 0 to 5 foot section. You're like, what the heck is going on, right?
There's like 10,000.
Yeah, Lucky Craft has thousands of different colors of Squarebills, right? And sizes. But what I do, and this is kind of how I'd like to do most baits when I go to a new lake or just anywhere, pick just a couple colors, and it could just be your shad and your crawdad. Pick your shad color, and I'm going to go with this one, right? Pearl shad color. This is a TO crawl. I'm going to go to that lake, and I'm going to just fish it as fast as I can. I'm going to cover water, and bang, I caught one. That fish is going to tell you if you have the right color, because then there's a whole 100 different color palettes you can choose from. So if you keep it simple and you say, hey, I'm going to pick this pearl threadfin shad, and you catch a fish on it, if it's hooked outside the mouth, kind of funky, if it's, doing one of those, you could be like, well, maybe that's just because there was some bait around, water's dirty, he just slopped at it, couldn't see it, blah, blah, blah. Then you catch another one, it's still hooked outside the mouth, they're not getting it. That's when I'm going to say, hey, listen, I got the bait, I got the right depth, let's switch up colors. I'm going to go with American Shad, just something a little bit different, and that's all it could take. You go down the bank, and next thing you know, bang, it's sideways. It could be gangbusters, where you're not only catching one every 20 casts, now you're catching one every 10 casts, and they're actually eating it.
Yeah, so, they got the front treble hook on the inside of the jaw.
Exactly. And that's the biggest thing, is just pick one up and throw it, because it's not a matter of, like, in my opinion, do I have the right color? Most fish, they're going to eat it at some way. But to get more bites, you could just do little tweaks and little changes with colors that way. Because, I have a ton of different colors, but I'll just keep it basic. Keep it with one, and then I'll get a bite. They're eating it funky. Man, the water's a little dirty. I got to go to this. Next thing you know, if they're bleeding on the carpet, you're like, holy smokes, this is the bait.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great tip.
So, but yeah, that's what I would say. Keep it simple. And just
shuck and wind, baby. Shuck and wind.
That is it.
And bounce it off of just about every piece of cover that you can, and hopefully it doesn't get hung up.
Exactly. Make them react to it, and they'll eat it.
Now, actually, before I do let you go, I did think of like one more question. I apologize.
Yeah.
It's retrieve cadence, right? Like, you're not just kind of like walk our viewers through, not just me, but walk our viewers through like a retrieve cadence, and maybe like if you're not getting bit on one, what are some tricks you can give to maybe try to influence a fish into biting? Because I think that's a very under talked about thing when it comes to crankbait fishing, is that it's not always just a chuck and wind. There's a lot of little intricacies that go into it.
There definitely is. And I think there's more of, this is my opinion, I might be thinking too general with the Squarebill. Like I keep it fairly basic with the Squarebill. I'm more of a chuck and wind type guy with a Squarebill, that 0 to 5 foot water column.
Okay.
I fish it fast, like I said, but I also stop it, pause, reel, pause. I do that, and that's pretty much it. Either a straight wind or a reel and a pause, and that's only my two cadences when I'm fishing a Squarebill. I get a little trickier when I go deeper than that, like with my deeper diving crankbaits. But in my opinion, with the way a lot of these Squarebills work, so you have, this is a Lucky Craft, this is a 1.5, right here. You see, and this is a Lucky Craft BDS 2, and you see the bill on that. The reason that there's two different bill sizes and shapes is because they do different things when they reflect off rocks. I will correspond my the reaction of that bait off of those rocks, and I'll pick which one is going to be better throughout, either watercolor, how they're reacting and whatever it may be.
Just
So
based on how let the fish tell you what they want is essentially.
exactly. But what I'm trying to say is with cadence is this Squarebill is the thing that's doing the work for my cadence. So when it's hitting off of rocks, that's my cadence as far as like, oh, it's bouncing off this, it's bouncing off that. It's doing all sorts of stuff.
Yeah. So basically, Andrew, what you're saying is it's more important to bounce it off of stuff and deflect it than it is to alter your real cadence.
Exactly. Most of the time up shallow.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I like it. Well,
That's
I
how I like
appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's where we're going to end it, right? Like,
sounds good.
because I think that's a great way to end it here.
Totally.
I mean, it's a very under talked about thing when it comes to like cranking any general like reaction bait fishing is cadence and deflecting it. Like people are always like, yeah, just go out and do this and go down that bank and you'll catch them. But there's very small, minute details that a lot of us miss. So
Totally. Yeah, you want that bait. I mean, grinding, like hitting it as hard as you can, getting it stuck. And another tip would be those lure retrievers that you can push out. I don't know what they're called. Not the ones with the rope.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I
The
don't know
ones,
the name of. Yeah.
It'll save you a ton of money. It'll save you a ton because even though they're like only 2 or 3 feet down, sometimes they get wedged or you get on fishing line. That's most of the time is what will happen is you'll get fishing line. That lure retriever, you'll save hundreds of dollars.
That's a great tip too. So those who are listening, make sure you buy lure retrievers while you're you're throwing Squarebills and crankbaits. So, all right, man. Well, I want to say thank you for joining us here. I hope to have you back again here in the future and hope you're getting everything buttoned up here. I think you have like a championship event coming up, right? The Toyota.
At Table Rock. Yeah.
Good luck with that. And if you plan on fishing the Invitationals again next year? Good luck there, man.
Appreciate it. Yeah, thanks for having me on. It was good talking with you.
Awesome. Thanks for everything, and we'll chat soon.
Yep. Thanks, dude.
Right. Yep. Thank you. All right, everyone. Well, thanks for tuning in to this week's episode here on the Lure Lab. We had an awesome episode today with Andrew Loberg and just breaking down Squarebill fishing in the fall. And to be honest, I was not expecting him to say that he speed fishes a Squarebill in the fall, but I should have thought hand in hand. You know, I like to speed crank a deep diver. So why not speed crank a Squarebill? And the two just didn't resonate in my brain. But thank you, as always, to everyone who tunes in on a weekly basis. We greatly appreciate everyone who tunes in, new or have listened to every single episode. We can't thank you enough. So that being said, if you are on YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe button. If you're new here, maybe even comment down below what your favorite Squarebill is, maybe even your setup. If you're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever your favorite podcast platform is, leave a review if they allow you to. We appreciate that. And it helps this podcast be seen by more fishermen who love to tune in on a weekly basis. And we will see you all next Saturday.